Let me ask you something. What does it take to betray the most powerful empire on earth, walk into your homeland with 300 men, and hold off armies 10 times your size for 25 years straight? What kind of man looks at 100,000 Ottoman soldiers marching toward his fortress and decides not to run, not to surrender, but to fight? His name was George Castrioti. The Ottomans called him Skanderbeg, Alexander the Lord. History remembers him as Skanderbeg, and for a generation, he was the nightmare the Sultan couldn't wake up from. Before we get into exactly how one man turned Albania into a graveyard for Ottoman ambitions, here's what I need from you. If you learned something new today, if this story moves you at all, hit that like button and drop a comment below. Tell me what you think. No fluff. No filler. Just the facts, the decisions, and the consequences that changed Europe. Now let's go back 580 years to a world where empires devoured kingdoms like wolves tearing through sheep. The year is 1405. The Balkans are drowning in blood. The Ottoman war machine is unstoppable, a juggernaut of janissaries, Sipahi cavalry, and cannons that can punch through castle walls like they're made of paper. Serbia has fallen. Bulgaria is gone. Byzantium is gasping its last breath, reduced to the walls of Constantinople and nothing more. The Christian kingdoms of Eastern Europe are collapsing one by one, and everyone knows what's coming next. Albania. A fractured patchwork of mountain principalities, feuding noble families, and fortresses clinging to cliffs that scrape the sky. It's not a unified kingdom. It's barely even a country. Just a collection of warlords who hate the Ottomans slightly more than they hate each other. One of those warlords is John Castrioti, Lord of Mat, Dibra, and Merdita, a rugged domain of jagged peaks, narrow valleys, and villages perched on mountainsides where the air is thin and the winters are brutal. John knows what's coming. The Ottomans don't negotiate. They don't compromise. They conquer. And when they conquer, they don't just take your land. They take your sons. It's called the devshirme, the blood tax. Christian boys, ripped from their families, dragged to the Sultan's court, converted to Islam, and trained to become the empire's deadliest weapons. The janissaries. The elite infantry corps that has shattered every Christian army foolish enough to stand against them. John Castrioti has 4 sons. Stanisha, Riposh, Konstantin, and George, the youngest. In 1415, when George is just 10 years old, his father makes the decision every Balkan lord dreads. He sends the boy to Edirne, the Ottoman capital, as a hostage. A guarantee of loyalty. A living insurance policy that John won't rebel. George doesn't cry. He doesn't beg his father to reconsider. He just goes. And when he arrives at the Ottoman court, they strip everything away, his name, his faith, his past. They rebuild him as something new. Something Ottoman. The boy enters the Enderun school, the Sultan's academy for future commanders. It's not a school in any normal sense. It's a forge. They beat you. They starve you. They push you until you break or become unbreakable. Most boys don't survive. The ones who do become generals, governors, viziers, the men who run the empire. George not only survives, he excels. He's faster than the other boys. Stronger. Smarter. He absorbs tactics like a sponge soaking up water. He learns how the Ottomans think, how they fight, how they turn overwhelming numbers into decisive victories. By his early 20s, George Castrioti has become Skanderbeg, Alexander the Lord. The Sultan's commanders watch him and see the next great general. He leads cavalry charges against Christian crusaders. He burns villages in Hungary. He fights for Sultan Murad II with the loyalty of a true believer, and Murad rewards him with command over 5,000 horsemen. 5,000 of the finest cavalry in the Ottoman army follow Skanderbeg into battle without question. The Ottomans think they've created the perfect weapon. They're about to learn how badly they miscalculated. November 1443. The Hungarian kingdom and the Ottoman Empire collide at the Battle of Niš. It's part of a larger crusade, one last desperate attempt by Christian Europe to push back the Turkish tide before it swallows everything. János Hunyadi, the White Knight of Hungary, is leading the Crusaders. Sultan Murad II commands the Ottoman host. Tens of thousands of men crash into each other in a storm of steel and fire. And in the middle of the chaos, Skanderbeg makes a choice that will echo through history. He deserts. 300 Albanian cavalrymen, men from his own homeland, men who've been watching him, waiting for a sign, follow him. They turn their horses west. They ride toward the mountains. They ride home. 25 days later, on November 28, 1443, they arrive at Cluj. Cluj, the fortress of Skanderbeg's ancestors, now occupied by an Ottoman garrison. The castle sits on a rocky hilltop overlooking the valley below, its walls thick, its position commanding. Taking it by force would cost hundreds of lives. So Skanderbeg doesn't even try. He carries with him a forged document, a letter supposedly written by Sultan Murad himself, ordering the governor of Cluj to surrender the fortress to Skanderbeg for strategic military operations. The forgery is flawless. Why wouldn't it be? Skanderbeg spent 20 years learning how Ottoman bureaucracy works. He knows the seals, the phrasing, the protocol. The governor reads the letter. He believes it. Of course he does. Skanderbeg is one of the Sultan's most trusted commanders. The gates open. Skanderbeg walks in with his 300 men. And once he's inside, once the Ottomans have let down their guard, he draws his sword and gives the order. Kill them. Kill them all. The Ottoman garrison is slaughtered. The governor is executed. Turkish settlers living in the town below are given a choice: convert to Christianity or die. Most convert. The ones who refuse are put to the sword. Skanderbeg isn't playing games. He's sending a message written in blood. He tears down the Ottoman banners. He raises a new flag over Cluj, a red field with a black double-headed eagle, the ancient symbol of Byzantine emperors. It's a declaration. Albania will never kneel to the Sultan again. This is rebellion. This is war. And Skanderbeg has just fired the first shot. But here's the problem. Skanderbeg commands maybe 4,000 soldiers. The Ottoman Empire has hundreds of thousands. Simple math says this rebellion should last about 6 weeks before it's drowned in Turkish blood. Skanderbeg knows this. He's not stupid. He spent 2 decades studying Ottoman military doctrine. He knows how they crush rebellions. They send an overwhelming force, they surround your fortresses, they starve you out, they execute the leaders, and they scatter the survivors. It's a machine. It's efficient. It's unstoppable. Unless you change the rules. Skanderbeg isn't trying to defeat the Ottoman Empire. That's impossible. What he's trying to do is make Albania so expensive to conquer, so bloody to hold, so maddeningly difficult to pacify that the sultans eventually decide it's not worth it. He's going to turn the mountains into a meat grinder. And to do that, he needs allies. March 2nd, 1444. The town of Lajja, under Venetian protection. Albanian nobles gather for a historic meeting. These men have been feuding for generations. Blood feuds, territorial disputes, family vendettas, the usual Balkan nightmare. Getting them in the same room without someone getting stabbed is a minor miracle. But Skanderbeg is convincing. He proposes something radical: the League of Lajja, a military alliance where every lord keeps his land, contributes troops, and recognizes Skanderbeg as supreme military commander during wartime. It's not a kingdom. It's not even a unified state. It's a war pact. A temporary coalition held together by shared desperation and the knowledge that the Ottomans will pick them off one by one if they stay divided. Somehow, it works. The League is formed. Skanderbeg becomes the defender of Albania. And now, the Ottomans have a real problem. June 1444. Sultan Murad II is furious. One of his best generals has betrayed him, seized a fortress, and is rallying Albanian lords to rebellion. This cannot stand. Murad sends an army to crush Skanderbeg before the revolt spreads. 40,000 men under Ali Pasha, veterans, janissaries, Sipahi cavalry. They march toward Cluj expecting to squash this rebellion in a matter of weeks. Skanderbeg doesn't wait for them to besiege his fortress. That would be suicide. Instead, he marches out to meet them. 15,000 Albanian troops, a mix of feudal levies, peasant militia, and minor nobility with decent equipment. On paper, they're outnumbered almost 3-1. On paper, this is a massacre waiting to happen. But Skanderbeg chooses the battlefield. June 29, 1444. The valley of Torviol, hemmed in by steep mountains on both sides. The terrain is narrow, rocky, broken. Perfect for an ambush. Terrible for maneuvering a large army. Ali Pasha marches his 40,000 men into the valley, expecting Skanderbeg to dig in and fight defensively. He's wrong. Skanderbeg attacks first. Albanian cavalry charges down from the high ground like an avalanche of steel. They smash into the Ottoman flanks before Ali Pasha's commanders can react. The Turks try to regroup, try to bring their superior numbers to bear, but the valley walls pin them in. They can't maneuver. They can't spread out. And the Albanians are everywhere, screaming war cries, driving lances through Turkish armor, hacking at the janissaries with swords and axes. It's not a battle. It's a slaughter. 10,000 Ottomans die. Another 2,000 are captured. Ali Pasha survives, but his army is shattered. He limps back to Ottoman territory in disgrace. Albanian losses, 4,000 dead and wounded. It's a bloodbath. But it's a victory. And more importantly, it's a message. Skanderbeg isn't some bandit chieftain who got lucky. He's a trained Ottoman general using everything he learned against his former masters. The news spreads across the Balkans like wildfire. The Ottomans lost. The invincible janissaries were routed by Albanian mountain fighters. Christian Europe, which has been losing for decades, suddenly has a hero. Pope Eugene IV sends letters praising Skanderbeg. Venice offers trade agreements. Hungary pledges support. For the first time in a generation, the Ottomans are on the defensive in the Balkans. But Murad II isn't done. Not even close. The Ottomans send another army. 15,000 men under Firaz Pasha. Skanderbeg destroys them at Mokra. Firaz himself is killed along with 1,500 of his best troops. 1446. Another invasion, 25,000 soldiers. Skanderbeg annihilates them at Otanit. 5,000 Albanians butcher 15,000 Ottomans in a single afternoon. The Ottoman camp becomes a slaughterhouse. Survivors flee, abandoning mountains of supplies, weapons, gold, and armor. Skanderbeg's men are swimming in plunder. By now, the pattern is clear. The Ottomans send an army. Skanderbeg picks the terrain. He uses the mountains, the forests, the narrow passes to neutralize their numbers. He strikes fast, hits hard, and disappears before they can counterattack. It's guerrilla warfare mixed with open field battles, a hybrid strategy that the Ottomans have never faced before. And it's working. But Sultan Murad II is losing patience. He's tired of sending armies to die in Albanian valleys. He's tired of his generals coming back with excuses. In 1450, he decides to handle this personally. He's going to Albania himself. And he's bringing an army so large that even Skanderbeg's mountain tricks won't save him. May 1450. 100,000 Ottoman soldiers march toward Cluj. It's the largest army the Sultan has ever sent against a single European opponent. Engineers, sappers, artillery, siege towers, everything needed to crack a fortress wide open. Murad isn't leaving until Cluj falls. This is personal now. Skanderbeg watches the Ottoman host approach from the walls of Cluj. He counts the banners, estimates the numbers, and does the math. He has maybe 12,000 troops total. Fighting a siege against 100,000? That's not a battle. That's a slow death. So Skanderbeg does something that looks like madness but is actually genius. He leaves. He puts Vrana Conti, one of his most trusted commanders, in charge of Cluj's defense. 4,000 men garrison the fortress. Enough food and water for 16 months. Enough ammunition to fight for years. The walls are thick. The position is strong. Conti is competent. They'll hold. Skanderbeg takes his remaining 8,000 men, his mobile strike force, and vanishes into the mountains. The Ottomans surround Cluj in late May. They build siege camps, dig trenches, position their cannons. The bombardment begins. Stone walls crack under the impact of iron balls. But every breach is repaired overnight. Every assault is met with boiling oil, arrows, rocks hurled from the battlements. The defenders don't break. And out in the mountains, Skanderbeg is hunting. Ottoman supply convoys disappear. Foraging parties are ambushed and massacred. Reinforcements marching to join the siege are intercepted and destroyed. The Ottomans can't ignore him, so they split their forces, 30,000 to maintain the siege, 70,000 to hunt Skanderbeg in the mountains. Big mistake. Skanderbeg knows every pass, every trail, every cave. He strikes where the Ottomans are weak, then melts away before they can respond. It's the perfect nightmare, an enemy you can't pin down, can't surround, can't defeat. And meanwhile, Cluj still stands. 4 months pass. It's October now. Sultan Murad's army is falling apart. Disease is spreading through the camps. Dysentery, malaria, typhus, the invisible killers that slaughter more soldiers than swords ever do. Supplies are running low because Skanderbeg keeps burning the convoys. Morale is collapsing because the men are starting to believe Skanderbeg is supernatural, that he can't be killed, that the mountains themselves fight for him. Murad gives the order. Withdraw. Lift the siege. Return to Ottoman territory. It's a humiliation. The Sultan himself came to Albania and failed. Cluj still stands. Skanderbeg is still free. And Murad too, the man who conquered half the Balkans, has been defeated by a single Albanian warlord with 8,000 men. Here's the kicker. Murad dies shortly after returning to Edirne, possibly from illness contracted during the Albanian campaign. Skanderbeg didn't just defeat the Ottoman army. He killed the Sultan. But the empire doesn't collapse. Empires don't work that way. Murad's son takes the throne. His name is Mehmed. History will remember him as Mehmed the Conqueror. And he's about to change everything. Mehmed too lays siege to Constantinople with cannons so large they have to be pulled by 60 oxen each. The walls that have stood for 1,000 years crumble. On May 29th, the city falls. The Byzantine Empire, the last remnant of Rome, dies. Mehmed renames the city Istanbul and declares himself Caesar. The shockwave ripples across Europe. If Constantinople can fall, nowhere is safe. Mehmed turns his attention west. Albania is still free. Albania is still defiant. That won't stand. But Mehmed is smarter than his father. He knows he can't just throw armies at Skanderbeg and hope for the best. He needs an edge. He needs intelligence. He needs someone who knows Skanderbeg's tactics inside and out. He finds that person. And the worst part is, it's family. Hamza Castriotti, Skanderbeg's nephew. One of his best cavalry commanders. A man who fought beside Skanderbeg for over a decade, who knows every strategy, every fortress, every weakness in the Albanian defense. Hamza is ambitious. He wants power, land, recognition. He asks Skanderbeg for more authority, more territory. Skanderbeg refuses. The League of Lazia is fragile enough without internal power struggles. Hamza doesn't take it well. In 1457, he defects. He rides to Istanbul, reconverts to Islam, kneels before Sultan Mehmed, and offers everything he knows. Mehmed gives him command of an army and a promise: help us conquer Albania, and you'll rule it. The betrayal cuts deep. Hamza isn't just some random noble. He's blood. He's family. And now he's leading 80,000 Ottoman soldiers toward Cluj, telling them exactly where to strike, exactly how to break Skanderbeg's defenses. September 1457. The plain of Albulina, near the Dibra River. The Ottoman army camps there, confident. They outnumber Skanderbeg 8-1. Hamza has told them where Skanderbeg's forces will be, how he'll deploy, how he'll react. They're ready for the defensive tactics Skanderbeg usually employs. They're ready for the mountain ambushes. They're ready for everything. Except Skanderbeg has changed everything. He's hidden 3,000 cavalry in the dense forests behind the Ottoman camp. Another 5,000 troops are concealed in the hills to the north and south. The main force, 8,000 infantry and cavalry, approaches from the front, visible and loud, drawing all the attention. The Ottomans see them. They form ranks. Hamza gives orders. The Janissaries load their muskets. The Sipahi cavalry mount up. Everything is going according to plan. And then Skanderbeg raises his hand and gives the signal. The forest explodes. 3,000 Albanian horsemen thunder out of the trees and crash into the Ottoman rear like a battering ram. At the exact same moment, the concealed forces charge from both flanks. The Ottomans are surrounded. Hamza screams orders, but it's chaos. No one can hear him over the roar of battle. The Albanians are everywhere, cutting through the Turkish ranks, driving wedges into their formations, turning the battlefield into a killing ground. The Janissaries try to form squares, but the Albanian cavalry breaks them. The Sipahi try to countercharge, but they're hemmed in by their own infantry. It's a disaster. 15,000 Ottomans die in the first 2 hours. Another 15,000 scatter and flee. The rest surrender or get cut down trying to escape. Hamza Castrioti is captured alive. They drag him before Skanderbeg, uncle and nephew. Face to face. Hamza expects execution. He probably wants it at this point. But Skanderbeg doesn't give him that mercy. He sends Hamza to Naples, to King Alfonso, with a message: "This man is a traitor. Do with him what you will." Alfonso throws Hamza in prison for treason. Years later, he's released and returns to Istanbul, where he continues serving the Sultan. But his name is poison in Albania. Forever. The Battle of Albulina becomes legendary, Skanderbeg's greatest tactical victory, the day 8,000 Albanians crushed 40,000 Ottomans. But it's also the high water mark. The resistance will never be this strong again. Because here's the truth. Skanderbeg is winning battles, but he's losing the war. Allies are dying. Resources are dwindling. The League of Lazia is fracturing under the strain. Venice, which promised support, is negotiating with the Ottomans behind his back. The Pope sends money but no soldiers. Europe is watching Albania burn and doing absolutely nothing. And the Ottomans just keep coming. Mehmed II assembles another army. 150,000 men. This time, there will be no retreat. This time, Cluj will fall or the entire Ottoman army will die trying. The siege begins in June. The fortress is commanded by Tanush Thopia with 4,400 defenders. Skanderbeg is outside with 10,000 troops, harassing the besiegers, cutting supply lines, launching night raids. The siege lasts 10 months. The Ottomans build massive earthworks, siege towers as tall as the fortress walls, tunnels under the defenses. The miners dig deep, trying to collapse sections of the wall from below. The defenders countermine. They dig their own tunnels, intercept the Ottoman miners underground, and fill the tunnels with burning pitch. Hundreds of men suffocate in the darkness, choking on smoke, trapped beneath tons of earth. Every Ottoman assault is repelled. Every breach is sealed. The defenders fight with the desperation of men who know there's no surrender, no mercy, no escape. And outside, Skanderbeg never stops. He raids the Ottoman camps in winter storms when no sane commander would move an army. He ambushes supply columns in blizzards. He's 61 years old now, ancient by medieval standards, and he's still leading cavalry charges through snowdrifts. The Turks start calling him the Dragon. They believe he has supernatural endurance, that he doesn't need sleep, that the mountains themselves obey him. They're terrified of him. And they should be. April 1467. The Ottomans break. Their supplies are exhausted. Their soldiers are freezing and starving. Morale is non-existent. Mehmed II gives the order to withdraw. The siege is lifted. Skanderbeg enters Cluj victorious. Again. The abandoned Ottoman camps are filled with equipment, cannons, gunpowder, armor, food. It's another humiliation for the Sultan. But this victory cost everything. Skanderbeg's forces are shattered. The League of Lajja is barely functional. And Skanderbeg himself is dying. January 17, 1468. The town of Lajja. Skanderbeg is in his chambers, bedridden. Malaria, probably contracted during the winter campaigns, is killing him. His body, broken by a lifetime of war, finally gives out. He's 62 years old. He's been fighting for 25 years without pause. And now, it's over. He dies quietly. No dramatic last words. No deathbed speeches. Just an old warrior letting go. They bury him in the church of Saint Nicholas in Lajja. The Albanians mourn. The Ottomans celebrate. And Europe, which watched him fight alone for a quarter-century, breathes a sigh of relief that they don't have to feel guilty anymore. 10 years later, in 1478, the Ottomans finally conquer Albania. Cluj falls. Lajja falls. The fortresses that held for so long crumble without Skanderbeg to defend them. The Ottomans dig up his bones and scatter them. Why? Because even dead, even buried, he terrifies them. Turkish soldiers make amulets from fragments of his bones, believing they'll grant courage in battle. The man who spent his life killing Ottomans becomes, in death, their good luck charm. Here's what Skanderbeg accomplished. He held off the Ottoman Empire for 25 years. He fought 13 major campaigns and won almost all of them. He turned a fractured collection of feuding warlords into a functioning military alliance. He used terrain, guerrilla tactics, and sheer audacity to defeat armies 10 times his size. He made Albania so expensive to conquer that 2 sultans died trying. But he didn't save Albania. Within a decade of his death, the Ottomans controlled everything. The nobles submitted or fled. The fortresses fell. Albania remained under Ottoman rule for 400 years. So was it all for nothing? No. Because resistance isn't always about winning. Sometimes it's about making the enemy pay for every inch. Sometimes it's about proving that empires aren't invincible, that a handful of people can hold the line when the odds are impossible. Skanderbeg gave Albania 25 extra years of freedom. And those years mattered. When the Albanian national awakening began in the 19th century, when Albanians started fighting for independence again, they looked back to Skanderbeg. They raised his flag. They told his stories. In 1912, Albania declared independence. In 1913, it became a recognized state. And the flag, Skanderbeg's double-headed eagle, still flies today. Skanderbeg didn't save Albania in his lifetime. But he gave Albania something more valuable, proof that survival is possible. That one person can change the course of history. That even when the empire wins, it doesn't win cheaply. If this story moved you, if you learned something today, here's what I need. Drop a comment. Hit that subscribe button. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. We're telling stories the history books gloss over. Stories about people who refused to quit, even when quitting was the only rational choice. Skanderbeg was one of those people. And his war, his impossible, bloody, 25-year war against an empire, deserves to be remembered. Perfect. A main remaining 5,000 plus words complete script leak raha hun continuation kasoth. But let's talk about what made Skanderbeg different. Because it's one thing to win a battle. It's another thing entirely to win the same war for 25 years when every rational calculation says you should lose. How did he do it? First, terrain. Albania is a nightmare to invade. The country is 70% mountains, jagged limestone peaks, narrow gorges, forests so dense you can't see 10 feet ahead. There are exactly 3 ways to move a large army through Albania, and Skanderbeg controlled all of them. The Ottomans had numbers. But numbers don't matter when you can't deploy them. 100,000 men marching through a mountain pass become a long, vulnerable column that stretches for miles. Skanderbeg would let them enter the pass, then collapse both ends with rockslides. The Ottoman vanguard would be cut off from the rearguard, and the Albanians would butcher them piece by piece. Second, intelligence. Skanderbeg knew everything. He had scouts in every village, spies in Ottoman camps, informants among Turkish merchants. He knew when an Ottoman army was assembling weeks before it left Istanbul. He knew their route, their supply situation, their commanders. The Ottomans were marching blind. Skanderbeg was playing with perfect information. When you know where your enemy will be before he gets there, you can prepare ambushes that look like dark magic. Third, mobility. The Ottomans moved slow, huge armies dragging siege equipment, supply wagons, camp followers. Skanderbeg's forces traveled light and fast. Albanian cavalry could cover 50 miles in a day through mountain trails that Ottoman scouts didn't even know existed. Hit the enemy where he's weak, then vanish before reinforcements arrive. The Ottomans would send troops to chase him, and Skanderbeg would circle back and raid the forces they left behind. It drove the Ottoman commanders insane. Fourth, winter warfare. Most medieval armies stopped fighting when winter came. Roads turned to mud. Rivers froze. Supplies ran short. You pulled back to winter quarters and waited for spring. Skanderbeg didn't stop. His men were mountain Albanians. They grew up in winters that would kill a Turkish soldier from Anatolia. When the Ottomans retreated to warm camps, Skanderbeg launched raids through snowstorms. Ottoman sentries would wake up with Albanian knives at their throats. Supply depots would burn in the middle of blizzards. The psychological effect was devastating. The Turks started believing Skanderbeg could walk through walls, that he didn't sleep, that winter itself obeyed him. Fifth, and this is crucial, Skanderbeg understood something fundamental about war. You don't have to destroy the enemy. You just have to make victory too expensive. Every year the Ottomans spent in Albania was a year they couldn't spend conquering Hungary, attacking Venice, or expanding east into Persia. Every army they sent to Albania was an army that wasn't available elsewhere. Skanderbeg turned Albania into a strategic black hole that sucked in Ottoman resources and spat out corpses. And the longer it went on, the more it hurt the empire's prestige. How can you claim to be the greatest military power on earth when you can't subdue one Albanian warlord? But here's the thing nobody talks about. Skanderbeg wasn't fighting the Ottomans alone. He was also fighting his own allies. The League of Lazia was always fragile. Albanian nobles hated the Ottomans, sure. But they also hated each other. Centuries of blood feuds, territorial disputes, and personal grudges don't disappear just because you sign a treaty. Skanderbeg spent as much energy keeping the League together as he did fighting Turks. Lords would withhold troops at critical moments. They'd demand more territory as payment for their support. They'd conspire with Venice or the Ottomans behind Skanderbeg's back. And Venice was supposed to be an ally. Christian power, trade partner, bulwark against Ottoman expansion. Instead, Venice played both sides. In 1447, Venice seized the fortress of Dagnum after the death of one of Skanderbeg's allied lords. Skanderbeg demanded they return it. Venice refused. So Skanderbeg went to war with Venice, in the middle of fighting the Ottomans. Think about that. He's besieging Venetian fortresses while Ottoman armies are marching toward Cluj. The Albanian-Venetian War lasted from 1447 to 1448 and ended with a treaty where Venice paid Skanderbeg 1,400 ducats annually and recognized the League's territorial claims. But the damage was done. Months wasted. Resources squandered. All because Venice cared more about controlling ports than stopping Ottoman expansion. The Pope sent money but never enough soldiers. Pope Nicholas V called Skanderbeg the most redoubtable athlete of Christendom. Pope Calixtus III gave him the title Athleta Christi, Champion of Christ. Beautiful words. But words don't stop janissaries. Skanderbeg kept begging for troops, for a real crusade, for European armies to join him in Albania. He'd show them the path to victory. He'd fight alongside them. Just send the soldiers. They never came. Europe was too busy with internal conflicts. The 100 Years' War between England and France. The Wars of the Roses. Italian city-states fighting each other over trade routes. Nobody wanted to commit troops to a war in the Balkans when they had problems at home. So they sent Skanderbeg gold and prayers and told him to keep fighting. Which he did. Because what else could he do? Hungary was different. János Hunyadi, the White Knight, respected Skanderbeg. They'd fought against each other during the Battle of Niš, Hunyadi leading Christian crusaders, Skanderbeg commanding Ottoman cavalry. When Skanderbeg deserted, Hunyadi understood immediately what that meant. They exchanged letters. They coordinated campaigns. When the Ottomans invaded Albania, Hunyadi launched attacks in Serbia to draw off troops. When the Ottomans pushed into Hungary, Skanderbeg raided their supply lines from the south. But Hunyadi died in 1456, shortly after his greatest victory at the Siege of Belgrade, where he shattered an Ottoman invasion of Hungary. With Hunyadi gone, Hungary's support for Albania collapsed. Matthias Corvinus, Hunyadi's son, was too busy consolidating power to help Skanderbeg. Another ally lost. In 1451, Skanderbeg signed the Treaty of Gaeta with Alfonso V of Aragon, King of Naples. The treaty was clever. Skanderbeg recognized Alfonso as his overlord, acknowledging nominal Neapolitan sovereignty over Albania. In exchange, Alfonso provided military aid, weapons, and money. It was mostly symbolic. Skanderbeg remained de facto independent, but now he had a powerful Christian kingdom officially backing him. The Ottomans couldn't claim he was just a rebel. He was a vassal of a recognized European monarch. Alfonso kept his promises. Naples sent supplies, gunpowder, arquebus, early firearms that gave Skanderbeg's troops an edge. When Alfonso died in 1458, his illegitimate son Ferdinand I inherited Naples. Ferdinand had problems, rival claimants, internal revolts, the Angevin dynasty trying to seize his throne. And in 1460, Ferdinand asked Skanderbeg for help. Skanderbeg didn't have to go. He was exhausted. Albania was barely holding together. The Ottomans were planning another massive invasion. But Ferdinand had kept his father's promises. He'd sent aid when Skanderbeg needed it. So Skanderbeg took 3,000 Albanian troops to Italy in 1460 and fought for Ferdinand against the Angevins and their supporters. He won. Battle after battle, Skanderbeg's Albanians cut through Italian armies like they were made of straw. Italian chroniclers were stunned. These weren't knights in shining armor. They were mountain warriors in leather and chainmail, fighting with a ferocity that terrified professional soldiers. Skanderbeg himself led cavalry charges at age 55, an age when most men were grandfathers sitting by the fire. He stayed in Italy until 1462, secured Ferdinand's throne, and returned to Albania. And the Ottomans were waiting. Mehmed II had used those 2 years to prepare. Skanderbeg's absence had given him time to rebuild his armies, stockpile supplies, and plan the largest invasion yet. The Fourth Siege of Cluj began in 1466 with an Ottoman army of 150,000 men. This wasn't a raid. This wasn't a punitive expedition. This was total war. Mehmed wasn't leaving until Albania was conquered. The siege lasted from June 1466 to April 1467, 10 months of hell. The garrison commander, Tanush Thopia, had 4,400 defenders and enough supplies for a year. The Ottomans built siege towers 30 feet high. They dug mines under the walls, packed them with gunpowder, and detonated them to collapse sections of fortification. The defenders countermined, dug their own tunnels, intercepted the Ottoman sappers underground, and fought them in darkness with knives and hammers. Then they'd fill the Ottoman tunnels with burning pitch and suffocate everyone inside. The Ottomans tried everything. Direct assaults, repelled with casualties in the thousands. Starvation, the garrison had food. Disease, they burned the corpses and maintained sanitation. Bribery, Thopia couldn't be bought. Mehmed was losing hundreds of men every day, and Cluj wasn't even close to falling. Outside the walls, Skanderbeg was waging his own war. He had 10,000 troops, maybe 12,000 at peak strength. He couldn't attack the Ottoman siege lines directly, that would be suicide. So he did what he always did. He made them bleed. Ottoman supply convoys traveling from the coast to the siege lines had to pass through 40 miles of hostile territory. Skanderbeg ambushed every single one. Winter came early in 1466, snow in October, temperatures below freezing. Most commanders would pull back. Skanderbeg attacked. His men rode through blizzards, hit Ottoman camps at midnight, killed sentries, burned supplies, and vanished before dawn. The Turks started calling him the Dragon. They believed he had demonic powers. Sentries would hear sounds in the dark and panic, firing their muskets at shadows, screaming that the dragon was coming. By March 1467, Mehmed's army was disintegrating. Soldiers were deserting. Officers were arguing. Supplies were gone. And Cluj, the fortress they'd bombarded for 10 months, still stood. Its walls were scarred, its towers cracked, but it stood. On April 23, 1467, Mehmed II gave the order to withdraw. The siege was lifted. Skanderbeg entered Cluj to find it wrecked but unbroken. The defenders were skeletal, exhausted, half dead from months of fighting. But they'd won. Again. The Ottomans retreated, leaving behind everything: cannons, armor, tents, food. Albanian troops spent days hauling Ottoman equipment into the fortress. It was the empire's greatest humiliation yet. But this was the last victory. Skanderbeg knew it. His body was failing. Malaria, contracted during the winter campaigns, was eating him alive. He had fevers that wouldn't break, chills that left him shaking for hours. His officers begged him to rest. He refused. There was too much work. The League was fracturing. The Ottomans would return. Europe needed to be convinced to send help. He wrote letters to the Pope, to Venice, to Hungary, to Naples. He organized defenses. He planned the next campaign. On January 17, 1468, in the town of Lajja, George Castrioti, Skanderbeg, died. He was 62 years old. He'd been fighting for 25 years without pause. He'd won almost every battle. He'd held off 2 sultans. He'd turned Albania into a legend. And now he was gone. The funeral was massive. Albanian nobles, Venetian diplomats, papal envoys, they all came to pay respects. Skanderbeg was buried in the Church of St. Nicholas in Lajja in a tomb marked with his coat of arms, the double-headed eagle. The Albanians mourned. They knew what his death meant. Without Skanderbeg, the League would collapse. Without the League, Albania would fall. They were right. The League of Lajja barely survived 2 more years. Lords started making separate peace with the Ottomans. Fortresses surrendered. In 1478, 10 years after Skanderbeg's death, Mehmed II launched a final invasion. Cluj fell after a short siege. Lajja fell. Shkodër, the last major Albanian fortress, held out until 1479 before surrendering. The Albanian resistance was over. The Ottomans controlled the entire country. And then they did something strange. They dug up Skanderbeg's bones. His tomb was opened, his remains scattered. Why? He was dead. He couldn't hurt them anymore. But the Ottomans were terrified of him even in death. Turkish soldiers took fragments of his bones and made them into amulets, believing they'd grant courage in battle. The man who killed so many Ottomans became, after death, a good luck charm for Ottoman troops. Think about that. The Ottomans respected him so much, feared him so much, that they wanted to carry pieces of him into battle. Not as a trophy. As protection. As if Skanderbeg's courage could transfer to them through bone fragments. History has few ironies sharper than that. So what's the legacy? Skanderbeg lost. Albania fell. The Ottomans won. 400 years of Ottoman rule followed. Albanian culture was suppressed. Many Albanians converted to Islam. The language nearly died. So what was the point? The point is that resistance matters even when it fails. Skanderbeg gave Albania 25 extra years of freedom. 25 years where Albanian was spoken without restriction, where churches weren't converted to mosques, where children grew up free. Those years mattered to the people who lived them. And Skanderbeg did something else. He proved that empires aren't unstoppable, that geography matters, that a small, determined force led by someone who understands strategy can hold off an enemy 10 times larger. Military academies still study Skanderbeg's tactics, his use of terrain, his mobile defense, his integration of guerrilla warfare with conventional battles. He's in the same category as Hannibal, as Belisarius, as great commanders who fought impossible wars. When the Albanian national awakening began in the 19th century, the intellectuals and revolutionaries looked back to Skanderbeg. They raised his flag. They told his stories to children. They used him as proof that Albania had once been great, that it could be great again. In 1912, when Albania declared independence from the Ottoman Empire, they chose Skanderbeg's double-headed eagle as their national flag. That flag still flies over Tirana today. Skanderbeg is everywhere in Albania. His statue dominates the central square of Tirana. His face is on currency. His name is on streets, schools, museums. He's not just a historical figure, he's the national symbol, the embodiment of Albanian identity and resistance. But here's the deeper lesson. Skanderbeg's story isn't unique to Albania. Throughout history, there have been people like him, people who stood against impossible odds not because they thought they'd win, but because surrender wasn't an option. Because some fights are worth having even if you lose. Because the act of resistance itself matters. The Ottomans conquered Albania, but they paid for every inch. They lost tens of thousands of soldiers. They wasted decades of resources. 2 sultans died trying to subdue one man. And when they finally won, the memory of the man who defied them lived on, stronger than any empire. There's a military concept called strategic exhaustion. It means you make the enemy spend so much blood and treasure that even when they win, the victory costs more than it's worth. Skanderbeg mastered strategic exhaustion. He turned Albania into a trap that consumed Ottoman armies for a generation. And even after Albania fell, the psychological damage remained. The Ottomans knew they'd been hurt. They knew one man had held them off for 25 years. That knowledge spread. Other rebellions, other resistance movements across the Ottoman Empire, looked at Skanderbeg and thought, if he could do it, maybe we can too. That's the real victory. Not the battles. Not the sieges. The idea. The idea that resistance is possible. That one person with courage can change history. That empires are made of men, and men can bleed. So here's my final question for you. What would the world look like if more people acted like Skanderbeg? If when faced with overwhelming power, with impossible odds, with every rational reason to surrender, they said no. They fought. They made the enemy pay for every inch. They turned their homeland into a fortress and dared the empire to take it. The Ottomans took Albania eventually. But they remember Skanderbeg more than they remember the victories that came after. The bones scattered in 1478 became legend. The flag raised in 1443 flies again. And the man who betrayed the Sultan and spent 25 years making that betrayal stick? He's immortal. Not despite losing. Because of how he fought. If this story taught you something, if it made you see history differently, here's what I need from you. Hit that like button. Drop a comment and tell me what you think. Did Skanderbeg win or lose? Was 25 years of resistance worth it? And hit subscribe because we're not done. We're telling the stories that matter, the ones about people who refused to quit even when the world told them they should. Skanderbeg. The man who betrayed an empire and made them regret it for a generation. The general who won almost every battle but lost the war. The Albanian who became a legend by refusing to kneel. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.